Hello. Hello. That's pretty good for Thursday. Welcome to the shortest talk title at the conference. Start Your Ruby podcast today, no experience required. This is the first time I've given a talk with more than one person, yet alone 3 people. This is the first time Andrew's given a talk. And Chris is this your first in-person talk? Would you believe that? But Chris has given like hundreds of talks, right? So thank you all for being here. Like I said, it's Thursday, and like Thursday afternoon of a 3-day conference. I'm surprised anyone is here that's not Chris's wife. So today we're going to be talking about podcasting. So the goal is that if you've ever thought about podcasting, or I don't know, maybe it's something you're like, I'm not really sure I could do that. Hopefully we can change your mind, and it's something you will start doing, and maybe we can help you with, hopefully. So before we get started, like I said, so I'm Jason, this is Andrew, and this is Chris. Andrew and I are both employees at a company called Podia. We are an all-in-one platform for creators, people who like to make courses, digital downloads, things like that. And I like to say that we're a Ruby on Rails palace. So if you ever want any more information about Podia, you can just tack on a .com, and that's us. I'd also like to talk about GoRails on Chris's behalf, because Chris started GoRails, but I'm going to talk like it's a higher entity. So GoRails provided Chris the opportunity to be here today. Also, so did Hatchbox, and so did Pay, and so did Jumpstart Pro, and all of the things Chris does for the community. So, and yay, RailsConf. So the 3 of us are excited to be here. Chris and I are excited to be here. No one could get a read on Andrew. Chris and his wife, Brooke, came to Portland a few days early. They were so excited. I was so excited that when I landed on Monday, I downloaded the Hilton app, went to look for my stay at the DoubleTree that I booked 2 months ago, right? Found the email, except I booked for the 2020 conference. I never booked for the 2022 conference. But I did want to shout out kind of the community, because I was at the DoubleTree like with my suitcase, like I'm about to have to like sleep at the convention center. And so there's a couple of people I want to shout out real quick. Ufuk was in the lobby. I don't know if he's in here today, but was like, let me help you find a room. And I was like, that is too kind. I'm the idiot who didn't book. I also want to shout out my friend Andrea, who was like, I've got like 30 beds in my room. Come stay there. And then, the real hero of my story is my wife, Shannon, who booked me a hotel within 10 minutes, and now I'm in the same place as my friends, Chris and Brooke. So enough about my woes. Let's talk about Remote Ruby for a second. So tomorrow will be 180 episodes of Remote Ruby over the last 3 years. Okay, cool. Thank you. Does anyone in here listen to Remote Ruby or... okay, cool. That is still wild. I wanted to tell you also real quick how this talk came to be. So it's hard to read, but February 28th of this year, which might have been the last day of the CFP, I saw this track and I told Chris, like, hey, you have a second to chat? I have this talk idea. You want to do like a multi-speaker talk? And while I anxiously awaited Chris's response, he said, cool, let's talk right now. So we thought, once again, we saw the community track. We thought, hey, this would be cool to talk about podcasting. Not like that we actually know what we're doing, but just because we don't know what we're doing, I think it means anyone can do it. So we submitted a talk, and there's one problem, and that is that there are 3 of us. But I only talked to Chris, so you're like, you told Andrew, right? Well, I didn't. So I was like, it's cool though, I don't have to tell Andrew because the talk won't be accepted. And then I got this email, and I was like, well, this is uncomfortable. So I waited till the best time. I was at work on a Zoom call, and I told Andrew and a bunch of our other coworkers, by the way, you're giving a talk at RailsConf. All right, so like I said, we're a podcast. We talk about Ruby and Laravel and now Elixir. We used to talk about JavaScript, but Rails 7, we don't talk about that anymore. So I wanted to first kind of talk about how the podcast came to be. And from there, we just want to share some lessons we've learned and how they could apply maybe to anyone who wants to start a podcast. So in 2017, Chris and I were chatting like once a week. We probably mostly talked about like Ruby, Rails, building products, because Laravel. We'd often like joke, oh, we should start a podcast. And I was like, nobody wants to listen to this. Like, we were just chatting. So in 2018, though, unrelated, I started an online meetup called Remote Ruby. And the idea was that we'd have this virtual meetup. Once a month, we could come together and talk about Ruby. At the time, my local Ruby community was sunsetting. All 4 of us in Memphis were tired of getting together once a month to talk about Ruby. So I was hungry for more, and our first meetup was February 2018. I opened a Slack group. We had some people show up. So I did a Google Hangouts, and I asked my friend Chris to come give a talk. And he gave a talk about building a hosting platform with Ruby. So if you're unfamiliar, I mentioned it earlier, but that's Hatchbox. So shout out Hatchbox. He gave a talk, and you can actually find this. It's still online. I took a screenshot of that like a month ago. But it was really good. We had a lot of people hang out, and I was like, this is awesome. We were going to have like a real community. So I said, this was cool, and I put out a call for more speakers, and no one responded. And so I thought, okay, I get it. Like, I'm a nobody trying to get people to talk online. Like, it's cool. So I did the second event. I prepared a talk talking about some like calculations I did with a Ruby program to try and figure out like the best way to get out of debt. So I was pretty happy with it, and I said, all right, who wants to talk at the next one? And so yet again, the next meetup I spoke, and I didn't give a talk. I shared my screen, and we worked through Ruby cones. And if you're unfamiliar with Ruby cones, they're like this wonderful exercise. You download this repository, you run the specs, they fail, and you make the test pass. And you keep doing that, and it really teaches you a lot about the Ruby language. It's a really fun exercise, even if you've been doing Ruby for a while. But there's only like a handful of us there, so I was pretty discouraged. So over the next couple of weeks, Chris and I kept chatting, and I was just sharing like, hey, like this is discouraging. I don't think we can keep doing this. And so we discussed like, well, like we want community content, because like when I came into Ruby in 2012, like there were podcasts and people blogging still, and kind of over the years, it was still happening. There's a little bit less and less of that, and so it was kind of one of those things where it was like, I don't know if we want this, maybe we should do it. And so Chris was like, why don't we podcast? And I was like, oh, okay. So we decided to record a podcast. But what we did was we set out with just one rule, and that rule was, let's do this the easiest way we can, because as programmers, we like to make things the most complicated they can be. So this first rule is the first lesson I would like to talk about, and that is start simple. So we consider this rule the thing that made us record more than 5 episodes. And there's a couple of ways that I'd like to talk about starting simply. And the first is, let's talk about good audio. So obviously Chris, and if anybody doesn't know, Go Rails is a screencast. I don't know the right word for it. Chris teaches everybody how to use Rails. And so he does this for a living. He's pretty good with audio. I pretend I'm pretty good with audio. I used to try and record audio. And so, you know, there was a real opportunity here for us to be like, oh, well, let's have the best audio. But we both know that over time, that becomes a chore and a lot of work trying to get good audio. Like, you can't, unless you spend a lot of money, you can't just snap your fingers and like have this pure audio sound. So the other things that kind of involved with this too is like, you gotta get a decent microphone. Maybe you got to find the right recording software for your platform, the right editing software, and then you need time to edit. That's a lot. And then also you got to take everything and bundle it all together and make it worthwhile. So actually what Chris and I did, we fired up a private Google Hangouts, which is, if you want good audio, this is the absolute opposite direction to run. But we did this because it was simple. Google would record this for us. We were together. This was before we were all using Zoom. It recorded the conversation. When we were done, we just had a link to it. So I know, like, this is a room of technical folks, and you're probably thinking, so you started a podcast. You had an RSS feed, right? So if you actually look at the only comment on that first video, great podcast, where can we listen to it? Actually, all we did was update our website because we had the remote review meetup. We just updated it and said, let's just link to YouTube, see if anyone listens. And like that comment was a signal like, oh, somebody actually listened, okay. That worked out pretty well. The other thing we could have done is try to really we're programmers, we want all the best technology. We could have chosen a podcast platform. We could have built our own, but that would have taken time. There'd been a little bit of a opportunity to yak shave there. We could write up all our show notes, or we could have something transcribe it and make that for us. We'd have to upload the episode. We'd have to submit the feed everywhere. The other thing we could do is focus on production. That's another thing, right? Every good podcast has an intro, and it has sponsors, and a really well-rehearsed script, and we had none of those things, including good content. But we sat down, we talked about Ruby, Rails, what we were working on. The episode began with a, hey, what's up? And we just went from there. But these three things, they're kind of hurdles to getting started. Like, if you zoom out and look at that, you're like, that's a lot of work. And like I said, that's also an opportunity, like a bunch of yak shaving. Like, you could maybe never launch a podcast if you try to perfect all of these three things before you get started. So from that, we thought about, okay, well, what would that look like if we were starting today? Like, if you want to start a podcast. So I would say, start small. Find a topic that interests you. It could be Ruby. It could be niche to Rails. It could be Laravel, obviously. It can be high, like very zoomed out, it can be very zoomed in. Just something that excites you, that you want to talk about. Maybe you want to find like a friend or just a co-host. Maybe somebody you know in the community. Maybe somebody, like I said, that you're just friends with and you think your conversations would be worth sharing. I'm going to say use whatever microphone you have. I have a little asterisk there, within reason. Like, phones are pretty decent recording. AirPods are all right. But just use where you have to get started. Maybe don't hit record and close your computer and use the microphone there, because that won't sound very good. But if it sounds as good as a phone call, that's good enough to get started. I'd also say if you're just recording by yourself, just use whatever's on your computer. If you're using a Mac, you can just open up QuickTime and hit new audio recording. And it's pretty good. This is I thought this would be very controversial, but it's actually how we record today. We record a Zoom call. So if you're recording with a group, just open up a Zoom call and hit record. And when you're done, kind of like the Google Hangouts, you have a whole file, except it's less compressed. It's a little better than somebody using Google Hangouts. And then also, maybe don't edit unless it's absolutely necessary. We didn't edit, and there's probably a lot of things I wish we would have edited out. But editing can take, at a minimum, the length of the time you record, at most 8 to 10 times that. It's a lot of work.
So that pretty much brings us to, adjusting our process on the podcast, because we want to keep it simple, but we also want to get a little bit more professional as we go. So things don't have to stay that way forever. So after we recorded a couple of episodes, it's looking like the podcast was something we wanted to continue, because when we started, we were like, maybe somebody would want to listen to this, and maybe not. And maybe we don't want to commit to it as well. Same thing I did with Go Rails when it was starting. I was like, I don't know if I want to commit to doing something every single week forever. So we were just, trying it out, seeing how it would go. And we, at that point, we're like, it's kind of fun. Let's keep doing this. And obviously, YouTube isn't scalable. We need to actually start being a real podcast if we're going to actually do this. And that's where Transistor comes in. It is a podcast hosting platform by Justin Jackson. Around the time we were starting, he was in early access, so it hadn't really come out yet. But we had talked to Justin a few times, and he invited us to the early access. So that gave us all awesome things like a website and that RSS feed that everybody wanted. And that was great. So we were able to use that for, really cheap and kind of get everything we needed and have one platform for it all. But once we got set up on there, we had to go back and use a sketchy website to take our YouTube videos and convert it to an MP3 and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, that audio is what we've got. So we just extract it and upload it, and they won't be great episodes ever, audio quality-wise, but it got the job done and got us started. Kept it really, really simple. And then one thing we had no idea of was we're kind of just guessing that we want to keep doing this for our own entertainment and our own enjoyment. But Transistor actually gave us analytics, which is nice because we are hitting publish and sending stuff out into the ether, and we have no idea if anyone's listening. We're not going to RailsConfs all the time and meeting people who are listeners or anything. And so it's been really nice to actually see, yes, people are actually listening to your show. So we saw a decent number of downloads, and that signaled a couple of things. One,
having a famous co-host really helps.
And then two, it was time for us to take the audio quality seriously. We had decent microphones, like a Blue Yeti and whatever, but they're good, and we had them set up, but they were getting obliterated by the compression on uploading to Google Hangouts and YouTube and stuff, and we were like, okay, it's time to upgrade. But we're still 5 episodes in or whatever, so we wanted to still keep it simple. It's really the main rule we've ever had. So we, already have full-time jobs, and if we're going to talk about editing a podcast for 8 hours or whatever, just can't do it. You don't have any time on the weekends or whatever. So we're absolutely not. Let's keep it as simple as possible. We don't want to edit if we can't help it. We don't want to do, splicing in ads and everything else. But the main thing was we're just having trouble trying to figure out what do we use to record. And that's when we switched to using Zencastr, where we can all join a URL in the browser. Everybody gets recorded locally with MP3s that will actually be uploaded at the end. So there's really good quality. If there's any hiccups on the internet connection, it takes care of that for you, and then it merges it all into a single MP3 that we can upload. And that saves an enormous amount of time. So that was a huge win for us. It was also kind of a pain because we can't see each other. So there was probably a long period of time where we're talking over each other during the episodes because someone would say something and we're all like, oh, I have a comment, and we'd all say that at the same time. So Zencastr was great and did a really good job, but we ended up, we're to this day using Zoom because we can actually raise your hand and wave and say, hey, I've got something to say without interrupting each other. But Zencastr was absolutely worth the price of admission. So adjusting accordingly on our podcast was, improving the audio quality, finding a good podcasting tool itself, and then just trusting our gut on it. We didn't want to spend $800 on, a microphone, an audio interface, and whatever, and if we give up in a couple months, it just collects dust in the closet. That was, not something we wanted to end up doing. So then, getting guests. We had spent a lot of time just doing the early episodes by ourselves, and that was fine, but we kind of run out of interesting things to talk about because not a lot changes week to week, right? So Jason and I were on a call. We had the first 9 episodes, and we were talking about how do we keep this interesting for ourselves, because it can get boring for ourselves too pretty fast. And that's when we invited Richard Schneeman, or Schneems, as you probably know him, works at Heroku, and we invited him on the show, had met him briefly at conferences and just more or less said hello. And Jason took this chance and cold emailed Richard, inviting him on the show. And, it's kind of crazy inviting somebody who's a stranger, but is one of your Ruby heroes and has actually won Ruby awards to take time out of their day and just chat with us. And we don't know how many listeners we have, or we have very few, so it's not like we can promise very much in return. But he said yes. So we were super excited about that until we realized that we've never interviewed anybody. So how's that going to work? So obviously, we buy every interviewing book on the planet because we're professionals, obviously. So instead of doing that, actually, we just wrote down some questions we had for him and figured that, maybe that'll work, and we'll keep it simple. And we wanted to keep this a conversation, We wanted to be like friends hanging out, talking about Ruby, just like we do here at the conferences. That's my favorite thing. So that episode with Richard was fantastic. We had a blast. We're forever indebted to him for being on the show. And it was really cool because we could see, immediately we had 100 more downloads than the previous episodes for the first 30 days. So it was awesome to see, we can make an episode, he can share it with his audience, and we can benefit from that, but he benefits from it as well. So that was really cool to see. And we're excited by that. So then we ended up, over the next couple months, December 2018 to March 2019, 13 of our 16 episodes were with guests. So we're like, oh, cool. And then we invited everybody. And then we realized, that's a lot of work. So we got to talk with some really awesome people. And a lot of them were heroes of ours, and we got to spend an hour talking to them one-on-one, which, is just probably the best part of doing a podcast. You have an excuse to go talk to these people. And Adam Wathen had said that, too, on Twitter or something, and he was basically like, he started a podcast, so he had an excuse to go talk to these people who was like, admire you, and I would love to learn from you. And it's a great way to make friends with those people. But it's not all rainbows. We learned a lot. It's pretty hard, actually. Too many interviews is exhausting. That's a lot of prep work, trying to keep things simple. If you know the person well, you can probably come up with questions on the fly. But you still have to prepare. You want to send them questions so that they have kind of an idea of what is going to be talked about. You got to be on your A game. It's not like you can just wing it, and it's a lot of work. And then guests are all different than each other. Some guests can sit and talk for 4 hours straight, and you can just be like, awesome, this is just tell more stories. But others don't, and you kind of need to grease the wheels and have things prepared and make sure that if the conversation slows down, you can pivot to something else and talk about those things. And of course, we're noobs about this, so we wish we would have learned that sooner. In a lot of the earlier episodes, we struggled with that. And this gives you some other things that are interesting. People start to listen to your podcast and then kind of invite themselves on. And, we get emails from secretaries that are like, hey, our CEO would be an awesome guest on your show. And we're like, you're just trying to do marketing, aren't you? So, those are easy ones to say no, but there's a lot of times where you're like, is this person going to be a good guest or not? And you don't know. It's hard to tell a lot of times. And we tried to find that balance of interviewing other people, but also just chatting with ourselves and having conversations that, we originally started out with. But since then, we've recorded a lot with other guests and just amazing people that we've gotten to talk to. But before we finish talking about the guests, let's talk about the guest who is a little famous here. We recorded episode 52 with Andrew, September 2019. And I'd known Andrew through GoRails, invited him on the show, and now he ended up being a host, which is awesome. So super awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, preparing for guests. You want to make them comfortable. You want to try and be, you're cold emailing these people and hoping that hopefully they would be interested in being on our show. So try and keep it simple and let them know, we have this many listeners, and hopefully we can talk about that for the community and whatever expertise they have. Before recording, prepare any questions you'd like to ask. That's just crucial to any hiccups in the conversation. You can just smooth them out and have a good chat for an hour. And then, of course, the guests are on the show for their own benefit, too. So anything you can do to help them with their audience, maybe they have a product they're building and want to talk about or anything like that, ask them about what would benefit them the most on the show as well. And then, of course, make them the star. They are the guests. You want to make sure that you get the most out of that conversation and their unique angle on stuff. And give them a platform to share where people can find them. So take your audience, share it with them, and vice versa. It's all really great. And then also know how to say no, because there's a lot of guests that just aren't going to be a great fit. So know your audience. If it's the topic or something, or just it's going to be tough to have that conversation, just politely pass, ignore it if you have to. And if you're unsure, talk to them. Just have a phone call ahead of time and see if it's going to make sense or not. You can do research and see if they've been on other podcasts. Maybe it will be a good sign for whether or not it will work out for yours.
But the most important advice we have today is stay steady. Staying steady is the most important thing, I think, in my opinion. And you've probably heard it said the most important thing to do when creating online content is to stay consistent. It's true. It's a little cliche, but it's pretty good advice. Using the simplest possible strategy, Chris and Jason were able to stay consistent. They were able to do a couple of interviews that one of them would have to do solo if one of them didn't show up. But for the most part, they both showed up. But when it's only two co-hosts and there's no interview, it's impossible to sustain. At the end of 2019, they were barely producing one episode a month. One episode is literally titled Better Late Than Never. And sometimes life gets in the way. One episode is cut short because Jason's oldest child got his arm stuck in a bunk bed and the family started screaming for him. And let me tell you, recording a solo episode when it's not something you're used to is weird. We've tried it and you guys have never heard those episodes. And this is how we ended up with 3 hosts. Now, if one of us is out, typically the other 2 are there. Jason was out for a month straight when he had his last child, and the show went on, as they say. Now for the technical part of the talk, this is a linked list. Technical part is done. Record often, double up if you have to. Interviews really help with that. It also makes it tremendously less stressful when you have to miss a week.
Yeah, and I will say too, bringing on Andrew, having hosts that you enjoy chatting with, not that Chris and I don't enjoy chatting, but for a while we were trying to figure out what we were doing. We started to burn out. We're we don't want to do this anymore. And Andrew was kind of like a spark. And Andrew, if you've not met Andrew, is very authentic, whether you want it or not. And but that challenged us to be more authentic, and it made Chris and I want to show up every week.
In practice, this is what consistency has looked like for us. Consistent year-over-year growth in terms of downloads. In 2021, we almost reached 100,000 downloads, and we are hoping this year y'all can help us break that number. Staying steady is important. Here's what it looks like. Release on the same schedule, same time, without fail. It doesn't have to be once a week. It can be once a month, every 2 months, but just keep it consistent. Double up to get ahead. With extra episodes, you don't need a backup plan when life comes at you fast, or just add another host. And what about analyzing your analytics? Don't. For the most part, we ignore our analytics, but there's some value to them. For example, when Jason and Chris had Schneebs on, it was clear because of the analytics that having a guest on was a boost for them and something they should do again. In fact, this is what having DHH did for our show 3 different times. The green is the average downloads for that month, and the blue is the number of downloads for only DHH's episode. Something that we learned from the data was that the title really matters. Here's some of the titles that had noticeably higher downloads from the episodes around them. What else can Rails add by default? Rails 6, Ruby 3, and RailsConf. Exploring Hayes gem file. Modernizing community is hard. Advocating for junior developers, Hotwire, and HTMX. My magic broke everything. Now we're a Webpacker podcast. Heroku incident, sim swapping, and security tools. But some of our titles haven't been so great, like Andrew's Hamel tattoo. Basically no Ruby, a lot of stories, and an abrupt ending. Andrew's Hamel ERB trailer, Tailwind CSS 2.0, and instant browser notifications with the cable ready. Jason joins Team Hamel. It's impossible to estimate the number of subscribers. Transistor really tries, but you can see some spikes in subscribers when our popular episodes go out. There's also this thing where some podcast platforms will take your file and make their own copy of it, and that's the one that is delivered in their feed, which we wouldn't get the analytics from. The better number is to gauge downloads in the first 30 days and total downloads over a set scale. That being said, please smash that subscribe button. It really helps. It means a lot to us. Even though we harp on keeping it simple, we also wanted to show what it's like to level up when the time is right. In 2020, I was working at CodeFund, and we reached out about bringing Remote Ruby onto our podcast network. At this time, Remote Ruby still had no sponsor, editor, intro, anything. It was a fantastic conversation. Chris and Jason joined. The editor CodeFund provided was Paul at Peachtree Audio. He magically made us sound like professionals, somehow. This is the ultimate game changer for our podcast. On top of that, Paul created intro music for our podcast that we still use today. It was the real "we're professionals" moment. What was really different was recording an ad spot. Having sponsors was new to us, and we were really nervous about how our audience would feel about it. Luckily for us, though, we worked with tech sponsors, so we weren't spewing ads for the latest mattress startup of the month. Unfortunately, in mid-2020, the CodeFund Podcast Network had to shut down, RIP. Eric went out of his way to make sure to help us set us up directly with Paul at Peachtree. At the same time, we worked with Honey Badger to be our sponsors, and over the past 2 years, we've been overtly grateful to Honey Badger for being the exclusive sponsor of Remote Ruby.
So we're 1 minute and 50 seconds over, so we're excitedly going to land this plane. But what I think what we want to leave with you is that it is your turn to podcast. There is ample amount of room for Ruby podcasts in our community. Schwad even said that in our podcast panel the other day. If we want the community to continue to thrive and be something that people want to be involved in, people look at from the outside and say, I want to be a part of that, we need more voices. We need not just 3 white dudes talking on a podcast all the time. Talk about the businesses we're building with Rails. Talk about the things you're learning, the things you're working on. And if you think you want to do this, come talk to any of us up here. We will talk. If you get home and you think, oh, that's actually something I want to try, just tweet us. Any of us will talk to you. Andrew, his DMs are just always filled up. So DM Andrew, and like the ending of any good Remote Ruby episode, thank you.
Okay, bye.